Okay, I'm going to run through the things you really should do when you go out and shoot, just some best practices that you can use when you're shooting. And also I'm going to show you the process that I go through when I come back and download my images. And I can kind of kill two birds with one stone in showing you the images that I just went out and shot today. And that'll give you some hints about good practices when you're shooting yourself. To start out with, I've purposely left the desktop blank because when I plugged in my camera, I already had the Bridge open, which is the program you're going to be working with initially, and my camera didn't show up in the Bridge as a drive, and that often happens when Bridge is already open and you plug in your camera. Bridge won't recognize it. So it's really simple. All you do is close Bridge and reopen it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go to Start. I've already been working with Bridge, so it's in the recent ones, but if I need to find it in all programs, I'll go over here to Adobe and find Bridge. Now I'm presuming you would have done all the things if you go through the asset management tutorial about setting up the Bridge to work the way you want it to. That's important too. But so when I open this first window for my computer, you notice over here I can see the Nikon D80. That's my camera plugged in. So if I double click on that and go to the folder where all the images are, then that's them right there. But as suggested in those tutorials, I'm gonna go to the folders menu here and go to my hard drive, and I'm just gonna pull that folder into my One Touch Mini. So it's copying all of the files from my camera onto that drive. And while that's copying, I can mention one thing, and that is, as far as best practices go, that it's really a good idea to download your pictures every time you go out and shoot and when you come back. There's a couple good reasons for that. One, it's never a good idea to use your camera as a storage device. One basic reason is that a lot of the functions in Photoshop and Bridge won't even work when you're trying to work directly off of a camera. The other thing is that what you don't want to do is be out in the middle of shooting something and have your card fill up. But that's a really sticky situation to get into, because then you have to, on the fly, you have to start deleting images off of your card, and it's not the best way or best place to do that. So I find that really the best thing all around is every time you go out and shoot, that when you come home you're going to need to be working on your images in the Bridge anyway, so just download them when you get there. Okay, so we've opened up all these images in the Bridge, and there's the folder that I downloaded to my external hard drive, and here are all the images that I shot when I went out today. And I want to point out a few things just in terms of the habits that I'm using. For starters, if you notice, if you kind of look at them overall, they're kind of clumped into groups. Like you notice that these three images are really of the same thing. I'm just moving around the subject and taking slightly different angles on them. Same thing with these three right here. Same thing with these three. These three right here are of the same machine. This is an old milling machine that's closing in my area. It's unfortunate, but it was great to get in there and look at some of these 100-year-old machines. The other thing, here's a set of images. Maybe I can get them all in the one line by enlarging a little bit in the Bridge. These three images right here. And on these three, if you notice that the exposure is exactly the same, the only thing that's changing is where I'm focusing in space. And these are a perfect example of depth of field. So you notice on the first image I focused right up in the front, So that handle right there is in focus. In the middle image, I focus somewhere in the middle of the space. And on the last one, notice that the ladder is in real sharp focus in the back. That this is a really good illustration of how depth of field works. That if I'm using, now I notice when I come over to one of these images and look, I have an aperture of 5.6. That's about the smallest aperture I can get on the lens that I'm using, or the largest opening, the smallest number. So I've got a really wide aperture, which means that when I focus, when I turn the focus ring on my camera, that I can change the little bit of space within that depth of field that's in focus. Here it's in the front, here it's in the middle, and here it's in the back. If I was using a really long depth of field, if I had a really small aperture opening and a really long depth of field, everything in that space would be in focus. I probably should have taken a shot like that too, just to show you. The other thing that I can show you in here, you notice that there's several sort of groupings of images. Here's 5 right here that were all shot on this windowsill. There's another 4 that were shot of these really cool looking drums they used to store bobbins in. So you notice that I'm shooting in groups of images, and that's a really important habit for you to get into. A really clear indication of distinction between an amateur and a trained photographer is that most amateurs will take one picture of something and walk away. Somebody that's trained knows better than that. They know to try lots of different things. They know to try different angles. They know to try different shutter speeds or apertures. So it's really not hard for you to go from shooting a dozen images to shooting 100 images. That may sound like a lot, but I was out for an hour today, and let's see how many I shot. I shot 94 images. I probably could have shot a lot more, but I wanted to come back and put this tutorial together. So that's a really good and very important habit for you to get into. Notice with these 3 shots right here, they're almost identical. The only thing I'm changing is the shutter speed, because I wanted to play around with getting enough light within the space and hopefully not having the details in the window outside just get blasted out. It's a very bright area and a very dark area, and I wanted to try a few different exposures to try to get a nice balance on there. If we just look at the one, that was a 400th of a second at f4. If I look at this one, it was a 100th of a second at f4. So I'm giving different priority to different parts of the room. On this one, obviously you can see on the bigger thumbnail, getting more detail on the interior space. On this one, it's a little bit darker. Still don't have a whole lot of detail in that looking out the window, but you can see some over here. Let's see what else we can find. Here's another small set of images right here that are of the same subject matter, just kind of middle, close up, and far away. Here's 3 more grouped together of the same subject, just different angles. So hopefully you're starting to get the idea here that you don't want to just take one picture and walk away. The more you shoot on the spot, the happier you're going to be. And I'll give you one really good reason why, and that is, as kind of a general rule of thumb, that when you come back and start working in Photoshop and in the bridge, my suggestion is that you never crop anything in Photoshop more than 10% off of the original image. Let's say this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and open that up in Photoshop real quick just to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, in this image there's just that little bit of something in the background up there that to me seems a little distracting. And in one of the other tutorials I've shown you how to deal with cropping in this way. I'll give it a try just in case. It's always good to review. I'm going to open my layers palette real quick. I'm going to double click on the background layer to make it a normal layer, because you can't do a lot of the functions you normally would on a background layer because it's locked. So I have it on a normal layer. Now I'm going to go to Edit and Transform, and I'm going to go to Distort. And when I go up here, then I can just pull that thing out of the frame. So my reason for doing that is because if I just went ahead and cropped that out, I'd also crop out an equal amount of this bin over here, and I really like that type and the color and everything in that, so I don't want to get rid of that if I don't have to. This is an especially good image to do this on because it doesn't have people in it. It's not going to look weird when I stretch it out a little bit. So I'm just going to pull that up, hit the Enter key, and now I've cropped that image. That is an acceptable amount of cropping in my opinion. What I don't like to see is when people go and shoot a picture and crop this much out of it and say, well, that's the image that I really want. It may look okay to you there, but later on when you blow that up, here, I'll do that. Because see, the problem is now that I've trimmed that down to a much smaller image, a 4:6 image. If I blow that back up to a 10-inch image, basically I've taken a very small piece of the image and stretched it out and enlarged it, and you can already start to see that it's kind of grainy. I'm going to open my Navigator, which is a very good tool to get used to using. I can move in on it. Can you see that grain in there? That's because I blew up that little piece of that image, and now I've just exaggerated all of the noise from that image. As it's on as a 400 ISO, I was inside where it was a little dark, so I turned up my ISO to 400. So this is a really good example of what I'm talking about, is that if I'm shooting in the way that I should be, I don't need to crop an image that severely. I've got the image that I want back here. If I've got 3 or 4 images to choose from, then there's no reason why I need to go doing these severe croppings. So if you find yourself wanting to do that kind of cropping, then that's a clue to you that you need to shoot a little more thoroughly when you're out. So last little bit of information, and that is once you've picked the images that you want to use, your final 4 images for class, and you've made all the adjustments to them, then this is why I wanted to see the contact sheets of the 40 images from your total, is so that I can just see your shooting habits. So of course, if you have a few images throughout that are really just off the mark, like right here is a good example. I wasn't paying attention, and I shot one in a darker area and then walked over to the windowsill and shot one. It was way too bright. Obviously that's just a mistake, and we all make those, so you can go ahead and delete that from the group if you want to. There's a couple. There's another one, apparently that was not a good exposure. So it's things like that that if you want to just get them out of the mix, that's great. Right there's 20 images to fit on a contact sheet. And this is of course after you've done all of the batch naming and metadata and all that stuff. But you can go ahead with this set of 20 images and make your contact sheet so that I can look at how you're shooting, and that's really important. That's why I asked for them, is so I can make comments on your habits as far as shooting. If I see a real checkerboard of one image that are very different, then I'm gonna comment on that to you when you turn in your material.